So before I begin, I just wanted to take a moment to reflect on the good deeds and the good intentions that we've been having week after week, listening to a lot of Dhamma talks, digesting it, and improving our understanding, and also being also feeling full of gratitude towards our spiritual friends who accompany us along the path. And on that note, I'd like to welcome Rod Lee to present his Dhamma talk on anxiety. And Rod Lee, I'm just going to quickly go through his profile. He's a director and teacher at the Tibetan Buddhist Society in Sydney. And he became a student of the Venerable Acharya Thubten Loden in 1978. That's been a long time, Rod.
Yeah,
it's been what, 45 years?
Oh, longer.
Longer, yeah.
Tell my age.
So we have a very, very experienced speaker with us today, and he's also doing a bit of rehab.
Yeah, I work in managing stress for people. Also a Tai Chi teacher as well. So I wear a few different hats.
Yeah, you've also been doing some meditation teaching for the Nature Care College of Natural Therapies. And you've done some audio programs for Qantas and
Malaysia. That's right. Yes.
Fantastic.
I used to have a program on Qantas with meditation for people flying. And I remember one woman sent me some fan mail and she said, oh, I was flying from London to America. And she said, I put your tape on in the plane and I fell straight asleep. So thank you so much. I figure a compliment's a compliment.
That's definitely a compliment, Rod, because a lot of people, including myself, find it quite hard to sleep on
planes. Yes, that's right.
Yeah. The seats on the economy class in general are not that comfortable.
That's right.
But in any case, we'll put our hands together and welcome our teacher, Rod Lee.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining me. So we're going to talk about anxiety, not how to get it, how to work with it. And there are many different Buddhist ways of looking at it. And I'm going to present some of those to you tonight. And at the end, I'm going to take you through some meditations that are beneficial for dealing with anxiety. So welcome, everyone. We're going to begin firstly with just a very short practice of meditation, of breathing meditation. Okay, so we're going to do that for about 10 minutes because we're going to do some meditations at the end. So I want this talk not to only be informative, but also to be practical for you. Okay, so we're just going to relax our mind, relax our bodies, and allow the eyes to just gently close. A little bit of space, if you can let some light in, is helpful. And then bring your mind home. Let go of the past, don't venture to the future. And just focus on the sensation of the breath going in and out of the nostrils. We're developing mindfulness of the breath. And important to particularly relax on the outward breath. So feel the inhalation, sensation of the nostrils, and then relax as we exhale. Keep returning your attention to the breath. Keep returning your attention to the breath. Okay, we'll finish the meditation there. So for tonight's talk, I'm going to separate worry and anxiety a little bit. They're in the same category. Worry tends to be a bit more about a specific thing. It might be an exam, it might be some kind of test, it might be something that you're facing, you're quite aware of. It might be a driving test or something. So worry is more about a specific thing. Anxiety tends to be this overriding fear that something's going to happen. And if we keep following that thought all the time, we develop this habit. We're going to be anxious about everything. So anxiety is more about uncontrolled worry. It has some very negative effects on the body from a physiological point of view. When we're having a lot of anxiety, we release a whole lot of hormones, stress hormones that are meant for short-term dealing with a problem, whereas in anxiety, it just keeps happening. So it's affecting the body in a negative way. So anxiety is excessive, uncontrolled worry about everyday issues. We're worried about this, we're worried about that, and we can constantly bringing this up in our mind. And so the wonderful thing about Buddhism is that the Buddha gave us many, many different techniques to be able to deal with the problems that we come up against. And anxiety is one of the major fears, and particularly in today's society, we have a lot of anxiety about everything. There's a lot of uncertainty. Unfortunately, the more we listen to the media, the more we hear about situations around the world that actually can make us feel quite insecure and anxious. Well, the truth is, we're going to have sickness, old age, and death. If you live on the planet, you are going to have some kind of illness at some point that causes you difficulties. You're definitely, if you live long enough, you're definitely going to have old age, and that has its own challenges, and you are finally going to die. So that's a given. So we can relax about that. That's all going to happen. It's more about the things in between that we start to stress over. We can't control death and aging. Or as my mother used to say, if you don't want to get old, you can die young. That's one solution. But the Buddha ascertained that we can't control these things, but we control our mind. And our mind is the bringer of good or negative conditions for ourselves. And we can learn to get a hold of that. And tonight I'm going to just talk through a few different ways of looking at it. And then at the end, I'm going to give some practices that hopefully will be helpful. Anxiety is not a solution to our lives. We often think that if we worry about something in the future, we'll be able to deal with it when it arrives. And I'm going to give you some wisdom of my dear mother who passed away at 99 years of age. And she was a born worrier. She worried about everything. If I was 5 minutes later getting to visit her, I was definitely in a car accident. Some of you may have mothers like that. So everything was going to be a worry. I'm worried about that. I'm worried about this. I'm worried about that. At the age of 90, she said to me, you know, all the things I worried about through my whole life never happened. And she said the things I didn't expect were the things that happened. And she said, I wasted a lot of time worrying, but she said, I built up a habit of it. That was my default practice, was worry. What's going to happen? What's going to happen? And so once we start to develop a habit, we become an expert in that habit. And so the Buddha gave us some techniques to be able to look at that. And I'm going to go through some of these. I'm going to read these so that we can discuss them. We can't secure the future by worrying about it. And what we develop is we start to create more and more agitation in our lives if we're having this anxiety that's ongoing. And anxiety produces this agitation, and agitation brings the same thing. It brings worry and anxiety. And so we need to be able to get a hold of that and look at that directly and start to say, well, okay, if I have a particular worry, how do I deal with that? Okay, so it's an exam coming. Well, then start doing some study. There's no point worrying about something. Try some study. And I've got a quote here about being anxious and worrying. And this comes from the 8th century, from a great master, Buddhist master called Shantideva. I think it's one of the best stress management quotes I've ever heard. So they had stress in the 8th century, okay? It's not just a common thing in the 21st century. In the 8th century, they had stress and worries. And Shantideva said, if it can be remedied, if it can be fixed, why worry? Because you can fix it. You find a solution. If it can't be fixed, why worry? Perfect stress management quote. If you can't fix it, well, then there's no point worrying about it. I'm going to look at the things under our control. Don't focus on small annoyances. They're not helpful. If you're driving in the car and you're trying to get somewhere quickly, the person that's blocking you in front will start to cause you a lot of frustration. And many years ago, they did an experiment of driving from Parramatta Town Hall to Sydney Town Hall. And there were two drivers. One was told, well, they were both told not to break the speed limit for a start, but one was to try and get there as fast as he could, whatever way he could, as long as he kept to the speed limit. And the other one was to keep to the speed limit and drive at a relaxed pace. Well, the guy who was racing arrived at the town hall only 10 minutes faster than the guy that drove at a relaxed pace. The difference being the guy that drove at the relaxed pace arrived quite comfortably. The other one's hair was standing on end. So it didn't achieve very much. And so getting frustrated while you're in a queue, while you're in a queue of cars, isn't going to help. So if you can't do anything about it, sit back and listen to the music of your car and relax. And this then starts to train us to let go. There's one technique I will share with you, which is actually very helpful. If you're a stressed driver, for every morning, if you're going to work or you're going somewhere, every stoplight you get to, take your hands off the wheel, take a deep breath, and breathe out. And just relax. This is every stoplight you get to. So what you're keying into the mind and the body is let go. Not quick, turn green. You can't make the lights turn green by worrying about it. by talking to them and even yelling at them. So take your hands off the wheel and relax. And if you do that for a week, I promise you, I have done it, that you get into the car and you drive in a relaxed manner. So that's just one small technique of not winding yourself up all the time.
Well, can I give an analogy here?
Sure.
Nowadays, a lot of us are using our laptops and computers. We treat them like the car analogy that you were speaking about. Every time we switch applications, that's like a stop button that we could
Exactly. Yeah, thank you.
we could incorporate there and just.
In fact, if you are working on computers a lot, just really program or put a note on and say every hour, I'm just going to breathe in, pull my shoulders up, and breathe out and relax. And this is an important technique. A relaxed body will relax the mind. If you relax the body, the mind will relax. If you relax the mind, the body will relax. You can't have a stressed body and a relaxed mind. It doesn't work that way. One of the reasons for bringing your shoulders up is when we're stressed, we actually bring our shoulders up. It's a protection mechanism. Have you ever walked around after having a stressful day going, why are my shoulders so sore? Because we're protecting ourselves. It's a very primordial reaction for the fight or flight reaction, which you will all have heard of. When we are confronted with a physical threat, we pull our shoulders up. And what we're doing is we're protecting our carotid artery from attack from a wild dog. We pull our shoulders up. It's a very natural reaction. What we haven't worked out in our 2 million years of evolution is the difference between an emotional threat and a physical threat. So when we get a physical threat, yeah, that's fine. That's exactly what's meant to happen. And then the thing that happens after you've received a physical threat is you take a deep breath and go, ah, and you relax. If it's an emotional threat, you just bring your shoulders up in a sort of a protection mechanism. And if you walk through the streets of Bankstown, Parramatta, or Sydney, you'll see people walking around with their shoulders up because they're under a level of stress. If we get a hold of that and go, okay, while we're on our computers, just take a deep breath, pull your shoulders up, and let them go. And just say to yourself, relax. That's one way of keying in the relaxation response. Become aware of negative thoughts. So this is getting in touch with our minds. Buddhism teaches us to start to understand what is going on. What's going on with my mind? And so when you see a negative thought come up, challenge it and say, okay, is that a valid understanding? Is that valid for what's going on? Or is that just part of my stress response to everyday life? So learn to challenge the thoughts and go, okay, do I need that? This is getting in control of the mind. There was a cartoon I once where this guy was in his office as a manager and he was on the intercom to his secretary who was saying, Mr. Jones, could you come out and see this document? And he said, look, Mrs. Jones, I'm worrying and I haven't finished. And that's typical of what we do. We just think, oh, well, look, I've got to worry about things. I've got to guess what's going to happen. You can't. You don't know. And in fact, by being stressed, you may react. If your mind's agitated, you may react in a negative way. Stop blaming others and circumstances for the predicament you're in. Take responsibility for it. If it's everyone else's fault, you've got a problem because you can't change it. If you take responsibility yourself and say, okay, how can I do this better? How can I work with this in a different way? And we take on the responsibility ourselves. And it's not about guilt and beat up. It's saying, okay, how can I work through this better? We need to look after ourselves. And one of the things that's really important, and my teacher used to say this, my Buddhist teacher used to say this, you need to look after yourself. When you can learn to look after yourself well, and I mean calming your emotions and working with your emotions, eating good food, doing exercise, all the different things that keep us healthy, then you can then do that for others. You can then start doing that for others. If your mind is always agitated, then you're going to agitate other people. You're going to make them feel uncomfortable. When we are around people that are relaxed, harmonious, we start to relax. And so by working with ourselves and developing these qualities of relaxation, harmony, and calmness, then we start to affect those around us. So to be beneficial to others, we need to work on ourselves. Out of a calm mind comes all the things that we need: love, compassion, understanding, patience, forgiveness, and good judgment. Out of an agitated mind comes bad judgment, anger, frustration, negativity, bad relationships. So we need to develop this quality of calmness and acceptance. Accept the things that we can't change. Going back to Shantideva's quote. And if we can change something, then let's change it. Let's change it and make it better. Buddhist teachings emphasize the four immeasurables: loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. These are important qualities that we can embody. When emotions are, and I'll quote this, when emotions around fear or anxiety become too strong, Buddhist teachers say one should recall examples of compassion, kindness, and empathy. And what we're doing then is we're getting out of our own road. It's not about I. It's about those people that are suffering more. And once we start to step away from this self-grasping, we then start to make ourselves relax. We also understand the suffering of others, which is often greater than ours in many cases. And we're then able to be of some use to people rather than thinking, oh, my problem, my worries. It doesn't help. If you can solve it, I keep going back to that, if you can solve it, then that helps. If you can't solve it, you have to let it go. You can't just keep going. It'll keep you up at night. It'll wake you at night, worrying. And I will tell you a story of this happened many years ago. I was teaching a course in stress management for a company, an engineering company in Melbourne. And they manufactured these huge capstans, which were bollards that they put the ropes around and drag tankers in. You see them on wharves. And after I'd finished the talk to the engineers, they said, oh, you need to go and talk to the guy that is the most chilled guy in the company, and he's the troubleshooter for our company. I said, really? They said, yeah, he's in the factory. He couldn't come to the talk. So I went and found this guy, and he was extremely laid back. And I said, oh, you're the troubleshooter? And he went, yeah. I said, well, do you have a lot of stress? He said, oh, I guess you could say that. He said, 2 weeks ago, I was in Brazil on a wharf. I got flown there. And one of the capstans, the electronics had broken down. And he said, I couldn't fix it. He said, I couldn't work out how to fix it. And he said, I had 2 hours to fix it, or it was going to cost $6 million. Because one of the tankers couldn't come in, it was going to miss its turn, couldn't unload, and there was a whole raft of infrastructure that was going to go haywire if he couldn't get this in. So he had $6 million sitting on his shoulders. I said, so what did you do? He said, oh, what I always do. He said, I found a quiet spot on the wharf where no one was, might have been in a shed or something. And he said, I just sat down, and then I said, what? And then you worked it out? He went, no, it's exactly what I didn't do. He said, I just cleared my mind and completely relaxed my whole body and just let my mind completely soften. And he said, I got rid of the whole idea of solving the problem. And he said, up it popped the solution, just like that. And he said, I've trained my whole team to do that. And he said, when you start to believe in this method of not twisting your mind around something, he said, the solutions for a problem will come up. And I said, well, do you know what that's called? He said, no, I've got no idea. I said, that's called meditation. And he went, wow, he said, I've often wondered about meditation. He'd developed it himself out of necessity. He'd got to the point where he let go the externals, he let go the worry, and he just became peaceful with himself. Peace starts within. Dalai Lama said, we can never obtain peace in the outer world until we make peace with ourselves. This is such an important thing. We have to develop this quality first. And then once we do that, we can then start to be peaceful for others. Another understanding is understanding impermanence and attachment. Impermanence is happening all the time. In fact, when I first got involved in Buddhism, they said, if you can understand impermanence, you are really getting the gist of what's going on. We keep thinking that things should be permanent. And for all those out there that own a Rolls Royce, I hate to tell you, it will rust out. It's not permanent. And so we have to get used to this impermanence, the impermanence of life, the impermanence of things. And the more we do that, the more we understand that everything is impermanent and changing constantly, we again start to accept things as they are. This is equanimity, being okay whether it's raining or it's sunny. If it's a sunny day and the person wanted rain on their crops, it can be a disaster. If it's a rainy day and you wanted to go for a picnic, that's a disaster. We can turn everything into an area of stress, anxiety, and worry if it's not working. So we need to be able, again, get in touch with ourselves and go, does it really matter? Is that really important in the long life that I had? There was an old couple who were, I hope you don't mind anecdotes, I've got a lot of them. There was an old couple who had been married for 60 years. And they said to the old man, what's your secret for a long marriage, happy marriage? He said, well, compassion, understanding, love, forgiveness. And they thought, oh, yeah, that's good. And they turned to her and she said, a short memory. In other words, she let things go. She didn't squeeze them, she let them go. And we need to be able to do that. Let it go, it's not important. This comes from Pema Chodron, wonderful Buddhist teacher in America. And she says, delve into uncertainty. When we think something is going to bring us pleasure, we don't really know what's going to happen. When we think something is going to give us misery, we don't know. Letting room for not knowing is one of the most important things. So if we grasp towards something, oh, this is going to be fantastic. This is just going to be wonderful, and it falls short of wonderful, then you're going to have disappointment, agitation, anxiety. Why wasn't it perfect? If you're fearful about something, you're not going to react in a particularly positive way or even a skillful way of dealing with it. So we, as she says, jump into the unknown, allow the future to unfold, develop patience about it. If you can fix it, fine. If you can't fix it, allow it to be whatever it's going to be. And this is then, again, impacts on our minds and starts to release that anxiety about worrying about the future. We can't control it. We can react to when something happens. And if we can react in the most positive way, then we're being beneficial for ourselves and others. But if we're always reacting with frustration and anger, it's not going to help. It actually makes our lives more difficult.
Rob, can I give another situation here? Something in between. Most of the time, we are anxious about something that we are expecting to happen. Not necessarily that we are trying to solve something, but 2 months down the line, I expect this to happen. If it doesn't happen, I have to decide something else or something like that. What would you say?
Well, that's the important point. We have to learn to become flexible. There's an old Zen saying, when you come to a fork in the road, take it. It's a con. You need to develop flexibility. So, and in fact, during the global financial crisis many years ago, I was speaking to a business manager and I said, looks like we're going to take a bit of a bath on the planet with finances and everything. I said, what's your take on it? He ran a big company. He said, flexibility. Learn how to work with what comes up. Be aware of when you hit a barrier. And this is the skillful part, whether you've got to push through a little bit or where you take another course. This comes from experience, and what experience does, it builds wisdom. Wisdom is having the information and the skill to know when to let things go and when you need to push a little harder because it's just a block. That takes time and experience to be able to develop that wisdom. But if you build on that and you go, okay, what happened last time? Okay, I got to this situation. What did I do? And was that helpful? And so then we start to become more flexible. We can only become flexible when we don't lock things in. We allow the space of the future to unfold so that we can become more aware. And again, we need to develop the mind that's calm and centered to do that, because if the mind's agitated, we'll make a rash decision. Hands up, anyone that's made a rash decision and regretted it.
Yeah, everyone.
All of us. And it's because we didn't have all the facts and we just jumped into it. It might be a purchase, it might be anything, but if we sit back, we learn to develop this quality of being calm and more focused, then we're able to become more flexible. And I want to tell you this, this was a really interesting thing that I came across. It's about knowing your mind. This, as I said earlier, what's going on? And so there was a poet, he's still alive, he's 98, a poet in the 1950s in America, a guy called Gary Snyder. And he was hanging out with a lot of writers, Jack Kerouac, Ginsberg, some of you may have heard of them, probably a lot of you haven't. And these were the Beat generation before the hippies. And they were wandering around talking about Eastern mysticism and different Buddhism and Hinduism and all this stuff. And they were kind of all throwing it together, but they weren't practicing it. They were talking about it. And Gary Snyder, who was part of the group, got a bit sick of this. And he went, nah, I'm going to Japan. I'm going to sit down with a Zen priest, a Zen monk, and I'm going to actually learn proper meditation. And over a period of 10 years, or quite longer than that, he spent 10 years in a Zen monastery. He'd do retreats of 3 months or 6 months. And he became a really strong practitioner, particularly of meditation. And they said to him, this is in his 90s, what is your practice? He said, oh, that's easy. When I'm walking down the road, I say to myself, what are you thinking now, mind? Just that. And when you start to say, what am I thinking now? And you reflect on whether you're having anxious, unreasonable thoughts, or whether you're sending out loving kindness and compassion, you'll know exactly what's going on with your mind. And so by starting to develop that, you start to get really in touch with your thoughts. Because our mind is the bringer of our happiness and our sadness. Not external phenomena, that contributes to it. But if we can develop a calm mind, then even difficult situations are solvable, or at least tolerable. A dentist friend of mine, a Buddhist dentist I know, I asked him one time about pain. I said, if someone comes in here really agitated and fearful about pain, what's their reaction to it? He said, I can pump anesthetic into their jaw and they'll still feel pain. He said, it doesn't matter. He said, I've given it to people nearly knock over a horse, so they're still so fragile and fearful that the pain receptors are through the roof. And he said, and someone who comes in here is calm and relaxed. He said, I hardly have to medicate them. Their pain tolerance is different. I went, oh, okay, that's interesting information. So even in terms of our own pain, the more we focus on my pain, my suffering, my injury, the more it becomes bigger and bigger. It doesn't mean that you haven't got the injury or the pain, but the more you focus on it, the more it becomes intense. And so we need techniques to calm the mind. So I've given you some understandings of this, but we need some techniques to develop our mind. I think we'll jump into that now. I hope I've given you enough sort of thinking around the idea of developing the mind, relaxing the mind, looking at the unreasonable attitudes that you may have that are causing you to be anxious. But Buddhism, the Buddha gave us actually techniques. And we actually did that technique at the beginning where we watched the breath. And I'm going to take you through a few different meditations, and I'm going to take you through a longer meditation. The first one is the breathing meditation, but we're going to alter it slightly. So when we began the breathing meditation for about 10 minutes, we focused on the sensation of the nostril, just in and out. And that's very helpful. But if you want to calm your anxiety, you take the breath right down into your abdomen. Allow the abdomen to expand and then breathing out. So the breath becomes mindful of a much longer inhalation. It's not a breathing exercise, you're just becoming aware of it, but you're taking it down lower. And this then starts to calm the emotion. And so we're working with the emotions, particularly in this way of doing it. So we're just for 10 minutes, we're going to just watch the breath, but this time we're going to bring it down deeper. And be aware when you do this technique of what it's doing for you, particularly if any of you are feeling anxious at the moment, then just have a look at what's happening. Again, it's important to focus on the action. Just that, nothing more. When the mind wanders to the past, leave it, come back. When it goes to the future, leave it. We have, according to psychologists, about 7 seconds of what we call short-term memory, is one way of describing it, or working memory. We have about 7 seconds. That's all. And we can only remember about 7 things. So what we do is we join those 7 seconds together in a continuous chain. And so we're just breathing in and letting it go. Breathing in and letting it go. Okay, so we're just going to do that for a few minutes. So relax completely. Feel the diaphragm lowering and the inhalation going into our abdomen. And then just let it go and feel the breath coming out from the lungs and out through the nostril. Again, don't breathe too deeply. Just make it a natural breath. Just follow it deeper into the body. So if you're really focusing on the exhalation, the slow exhalation, and the relaxation of the whole body and mind. Okay, we'll finish the meditation there. So just that technique of just bringing it deeper into the body will make you relax a little bit more. A quote here, examining a problem. I like this. If you're examining a problem, what's the worst outcome? What's the best outcome? And what's the most realistic outcome? So you start to separate things. Don't create a drama in your mind and that drama then becomes a movie, and then you become the main actor in the movie. It may not happen. Step back from that. Start to look at the mind and what it's doing. Pay attention to the present moment. That has all the answers. The future we don't know, past is finished. Being more and more present is really the only thing we've got. We only have this present going forward. We never get to the future because that's always the present. And we can't live in the past because that's gone. So we only have this present. So we can make this essential. One Lama, Namkhai Noba Rinpoche, famous Lama, said, don't charge up a thought. If a thought comes up, don't add stuff to it. Don't, like a negative thought comes up. Okay, maybe it's a negative thought about somebody. And then you go, yeah, well, I don't like them. I don't like the way they eat. I don't like the way they walk. And you're adding all this information to something. It's just stirring up the mind. And then we build this whole bit of information about why we don't like somebody. And if you ask the person's mother, the mother thinks he's the most wonderful person on the planet. We have these biases, and we need to challenge these biases and go, okay, is it important? Am I becoming agitated about something that's actually none of my business? I remember many years ago in a course I was doing, the person said, what someone thinks of you is none of your business. We get caught up in stuff, and we need to undo the stuff and become simpler in a way and learn how to deal with things in a calm manner. I had another quote here somewhere that I'm looking at. Doesn't matter, it'll pop up. So that's, okay, yeah, this is great. This is from Thich Nhat Hanh. Feelings come and go like clouds in a windy sky. Conscious breathing is my anchor, allowing the thoughts to dissipate. Don't charge them up. Don't add information to them. Let them go. Become present. Oh, that's right, yeah. A quote from a Lama. He said, the difference between us and a Buddha is that Buddhas aren't distracted. And we are distracted all the time. If you sit in a train carriage, I can be guilty of that myself, everyone's looking at their phones. They may not be looking at the scenery, they may not be present, they're here. And that happens more and more. And that is agitating. Going through stuff, keeping the brain constantly moving. We need to have some downtime. And it doesn't have to be formal meditation. It can be just being present. And that's very, very helpful. So we start to develop the habit of being calm and present. And that then starts to let go of the anxiety. We're the creators of our anxiety. I remember a friend of mine who was a Buddhist monk. He had a group of absolutely, I was in the talk, absolutely new beginners in Buddhism. They're all sitting there, very eager, and he said, it's all your fault. Which is kind of a radical line to use on new students. It's all your fault. And he said, that's the good news. He said, because you can do something about it. He said, if it's not your fault, you can't do anything about it anyway, but you're at the mercy of some entity. But he said, it's your fault, and therefore you have the control and the power and the ability to do something about it in the best way that you can. Okay, so the next technique I'm going to talk about is watching the thoughts. We are not our thoughts. our thoughts are part of us, but we are not our thoughts. And I want that to sink in, because this next practice we're doing is that we're going to sit here with our eyes closed, and we're going to allow whatever thoughts come up, whatever, doesn't matter, good, bad, negative, positive, we're going to allow them to come up. And we're not going to do anything with them. This is taking a step back from getting involved in your thinking all the time. It's taking a step back. So we're just going to watch the thoughts come up. If no thoughts come up, rest in the space. There was one guy I was teaching this to in a business course, actually, and he went, "Oh, there was a gap when there were no thoughts." I went, "Yeah." He said, "It was a bit scary." And there was a very famous Lama called Jamyang Chakri Lodro who was asked the question, "What's meditation?" He said, "Oh, you know, when one thought finishes and another one begins," he said, "there's a gap. Just make the gap bigger. That's it." And you really start to get in touch with the deeper parts of your consciousness when you let the surface stuff go. So that's what we're going to do now, right now. Okay? So relax, close your eyes, and wait for something to come up. And when it comes up, don't do anything with it. Don't add anything to it. Don't change it. Don't push it away. Just let it go. Let it be where it wants to be. And when it's had enough time, it will dissipate, and then wait for the next one. We won't do this for too long, just about 5 minutes. So we're not jumping into the thoughts, not doing anything with them, just observing. And allow them to just float away like clouds. Okay, we'll finish that meditation there. Yeah, just another technique of just stepping back from the confusion. And then the last technique I want to show before we have some questions is a meditation on compassion. So when we start developing love and compassion for others, we start to let go this, as I called it earlier, self-grasping, and our minds actually start to relax. When we start to have compassion for others, we start to develop this quality within ourselves. And to do a meditation on compassion, we need to first think about, actually, we'll do it. We'll do it straight. So relax, close your eyes. And I want you to remember a time in your past where you had an uncle, aunt, grandfather, grandmother, probably when you were small, who was particularly kind to you. And they were doing something with you. They might have been reading stories, or they might have been showing you how to cook, or just they were doing something specifically for you. And you can remember the warmth and the generosity coming from them. And you had an inkling that they weren't doing it for themselves, they were just doing it for you. And you try to remember that quality of their compassion, their love, and their generosity. And so it's a kind of softness, I think. I think that's a way of putting it. You'll have your own interpretation of it. But if you recall that, you'll get a kind of a handle on the feeling of what that was like. And you may also have that towards others, particularly children, this quality of looking after them, protecting them, and being compassionate to them. It also might be the same with maybe you have older parents or brothers or sisters that need caring for, and you can actually develop that. But there's this quality of compassion in the heart, wishing them to be free of suffering, to have an enjoyable life. And so we get this feeling in our hearts, and then we're going to do a visualization, and we're going to start with ourselves. The Dalai Lama says it's always important with this meditation to start with ourselves. So visualize in front of you a carbon copy of yourself. If you can't visualize it clearly, just get a sense that in front of you is a carbon copy of yourself. And you're going to send compassion, love to them. And this phrase might help. You are well, you're happy, and you're free of suffering, discomfort, pain. And we send this feeling out to ourselves, to part B. It might be the part of us that has had difficulties and unhappiness in life. And we're separating from that, and we're going to send our compassionate feelings towards that part. You're well, you're happy, you're free of suffering. If you want to, you can send it in the form of light, but if not, just the feeling you're sending out to yourself. Because quite often we beat ourselves up. We may be compassionate to others, but we don't often become compassionate to ourselves. We need to be. We need to embody this quality, and then you can't be compassionate to yourself, you'll find it difficult to be compassionate to others. You're well, you're happy, you're free of all difficulties. And see the other part of ourselves, or feel that the other part of ourselves is accepting this compassionate feeling. We're working with ourselves in this instance. We're not getting buried by anxiety and fear. We're actually working with our positive mind. And we're going to go a little quicker than I normally go with this meditation because we'll run out of time and I want to complete it. So see that part B of ourselves, accepting it, looking better, smiling back, see the result of our practice, and allow that copy of ourselves to dissolve. And then we're replacing that with a visualization of someone who's close to us. It might be a friend, relative, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, doesn't matter, child, just anyone we're close to, and maybe someone that needs, at the moment, a bit of love and compassion. And we get a sense that they're in front of us. Again, if you can't visualize them clearly, get a sense that they're there. And again, in a sense, we're saying almost the mantra, you're well, you're happy, you're free of suffering. We're opening up our heart to them and sending these warm feelings. You're well, you're happy, you're free of suffering. And again, see them accepting our kind wishes. Send the feeling to them and really wish them to have a happy life, free of difficulty. You're well, you're happy, you're free of suffering. And see them accepting our kind wishes and then dissolving. And the next person we bring to mind is a stranger, someone who we might see, a shopkeeper or someone, but we've never thought about their lives. We've never thought about they're just like us. They have happiness and difficulty sometimes, but sometimes life's good, sometimes not so good. And just bring them to mind. It might be someone you pass in the street regularly, or you get a bus with them, or maybe a colleague at work. And again, just like us, they want happiness and never want suffering. And again, we send out our feelings, you're well, you're happy, you're free of suffering. So we're expanding our vision of people around us, of our connection with people. And we're letting go our own self-grasping and negativity by generating this feeling of compassion for, in relatively terms, a stranger. Someone we've never really thought about. And see them accepting, smiling back at us, accepting the feeling of warmth. And then allow them to dissolve. And finally, a difficult person, a person we've had difficulty communicating with. Things are not easy. They might be a friend who's having a bit of a difficulty with, or it might be a colleague that we don't seem to see eye to eye with. But again, they want happiness and never want suffering. They're no different to us. And maybe if they had a little more compassion in their lives, they'd be easier with us in our communication. So again, bring them to mind or get the feeling they're there. You're well, you're happy, you're free of suffering. And maybe we see them relax a little more. Maybe they're smiling back at us. So we send these good wishes. You're well, you're happy, you're free of discomfort, negativity. And we're taking the first step in mending our relationship with them. And finally see them accepting it. And they're smiling back at us. You get the sense that they've actually accepted our compassion and our love. And then allow them to dissolve. And finally, the final part is what we see in front of us, all beings, human, non-human, stretching out as far as the mind can conceive. And we're sending them love and compassion because, again, all beings want happiness and never want suffering. From the smallest worm to the biggest giraffe. For the dog that gets really happy when it goes walking. They all want happiness. So we're saying to all beings, you are happy, you're well, and you're free of suffering. We're extending it to everyone. May all beings be free of suffering and the cause of suffering. May all beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. May all beings abide in happiness, free of attachment and aversion. And take a deep breath, allow all the beings to dissolve, and when you're ready, open your eyes. Well, I've come to the end of it. I hope some of that was useful. I hope some of the techniques were useful. Some of them you probably already know. But it's worth, really, if you do have an agitated life and a life of difficulties, then you can work with it. Possible to work with it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Rod. That was a simple, effective, and quite deep with all your funny anecdotes about the person who just didn't know how to actually meditate, but he was actually meditating, the problem solver from that company.
Yeah.
So I have a similar question to what the meditation master was asked about in his whole life of experience. How does he summarize this practice? So in a way, your 45 plus years of Buddhist practice, how would you summarize that?
Oh, that's an amazing question. How would I summarize my 25 years of practice? I'm too lazy. I need to practice more. It's given me, I guess, a sense of comfort. It doesn't mean that things sometimes are difficult and that I worry and that, you know, I'm human and that I can have anxiety. But I also know that there are techniques that I can go to help me get through that stuff. In one of the texts, I remember it said, because when I first got involved in Buddhism, I kept thinking, oh, well, you become a Buddhist and everything goes right. And so it's actually more than 25 years. And then I looked in one of the texts and it said, when difficulties arise, the techniques of Buddhism will help you solve them. So it's given me a certain confidence of following the path and being comfortable with following that path and working with myself in a way where something will come up. I'll give you one instance, another anecdote where I was driving across the Sid Island, and some of you have been around for a while. I've told the same anecdote a few times. I'm driving across the Sid Ironfield Expressway on the way to Bondi, and there's a car in front of me and one there. I'm sorry, I'm here, and then there's a car there, and I'm at the inside lane, and this guy just goes to cut me off, and I was going to crash into him, and I beat my horn, and he pulls back. And I had a moment of clarity where I thought about it and I went, well, I know this guy didn't do this on purpose. So I didn't drive up beside him and shake my fist and go, you idiot, look what you did. I knew that he didn't decide on a Tuesday afternoon at 3 o'clock that he was going to really make me angry. So I knew he wasn't going to do that. And then I thought, he made a mistake. That's what he did. He didn't look in his mirror. He was distracted. And I thought, have I been distracted? Yep, happened to me. I'll tell you what it did do, and it was many years ago. It makes me look better on I really took it on board and went, if I'm changing lanes, I'm going to look at my mirrors, but I'm also going to make sure that there's no one there.
Sure to check.
Really check. And that did one thing. But so I went through the process and I didn't do anything about it. We just drove and we changed lanes at some point. We got to some lights and I looked across and he waved at me and said, thank you. And I thought, isn't that amazing? Instead of making an enemy by giving him some strange hand signal, which people have developed, I actually made a friend. And I thought, isn't that, for me, just that little instant was, for me, miraculous. And I thought, I wonder if that was a Buddha giving me a lesson. So those are the things that have stuck with me. When you actually have the opportunity of having a really negative reaction and stepping back from it and going, what's the best way to handle this? And having that patience, and that patience is the gap that you need not to develop anger. The antidote to anger is patience. And if you develop patience, you won't jump in to judgmental anger. Someone may be having a hard day. Maybe you just need to give them that space, or they're distracted.
Thank you so much, Rod. We have a lot of questions.
Yeah, please go ahead.
This is from one of a young student across at Paramatta. Should be saying Paramatta. Huh? So the question is about how do you handle trauma? Like when you're having some phobia or fear, what practice would you recommend, in these circumstances?
Well, okay, so if you're having trauma, so I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not going to go down that road particularly. As a simple practice, I would actually say breathing meditation. Having been through trauma in my life, through a divorce many years ago, and it was quite traumatic, I stuck to breathing meditation. I didn't do complex practices. I sought advice from, I went and got advice from some very smart people, psychologists, one of them, because I wanted to know how to handle this. This is going back many years, and I hadn't been practicing Buddhism very long, so I didn't have all the techniques that possibly I've understood now. So it's important to get good advice. If you've gone through trauma, don't suffer in silence. Go and find someone. It may be a psychologist, be a psychiatrist. It may be just a friend who's very knowledgeable, and talk it out with them if you can. But then the simple practices is just very simple breathing meditation. Very simple breathing meditation. And I'll give you an example of this. This is a friend of mine, Dave Christensen. I hope he doesn't mind me mentioning his name. He's has a centre in Melbourne, and he did a 3-year retreat in the Dordogne for 3 years, 3 days, and 3 months. He said it was the first month was okay, kind of handled it. After 6 months, he was finding it really difficult, and he kept going to the meditation master saying, should I leave? He said, no, stick with it. So those are 3 years. He said he got to the point where he was going through a tough time, and then he had 3 months of complete peace. And he went, I've cracked it. So this is about 9 months. I've cracked it. I've got there. And then as soon as he decided he'd achieved it, he said his mind went into the most diabolical depression that he's ever had in his entire life. He said he was absolutely depressed the whole time. He was trying to do the practices, which weren't working particularly well because his mind was so agitated. He couldn't sleep because his mind was constantly fighting him at night. And he said, I found one practice. I just, whenever that mind came up, I just watched my breath. I brought myself back to the present. Just kept doing it very, very gently. And he said, gradually, I came out of the most excruciating depression I'd ever had. My mind started to settle. And he said, and then the next 2 years, absolutely fine. So that's how he handled his trauma. And he said that the depression was so palpable, he kept going to the teacher, and the teacher said, no, you stay, hang in here. So that's a bit of advice, but you may need some professional help. That's fine. People out there can certainly work with you. But as a Buddhist practice, keep it very simple. Don't try and do too much. Very simple, and not too long.
So on the flip side of it, generally, let's say we are doing okay, but there are periods of, say, intense anxiety where, our body and mind are just not cooperating. It's very hard to even sit and meditate. So even in the breath practice that you just mentioned, it's just not possible. So what should someone do in that?
Go for a walk. I'm serious. My teacher used to say to people, do walking. But when you're walking, please don't have your phone and talk to people. You can listen to music, but actually walk. Get out of your space. This really is helpful, particularly if it's in the bush or in nature.
Right.
If you can't meditate, if you can't pull your mind, just get out and walk. Just walk, get your body moving, and just experience the present. And if we're coming into springtime, you'll smell flowers. If you're walking along doing this or having an intense conversation, you're not being present and you're keeping the mind agitated. So let that go. I go walking, I never take my phone. I don't listen to music. I try and experience the breeze and the experience of what I'm doing. So that's one way.
A follow-up question on that. Let's say it's a very specific form of fear, say fear of snakes, or some other specific form of...
If you have a specific fear of snakes, don't go near snakes. That's really hard if there's a phobia. There are techniques that psychologists have worked with, and I don't know, I've heard that there are techniques. In the best circumstances, avoid it that you can. Don't put yourself in the drama of going in the snake section at the zoo, because it's not going to help. If you've got a phobia, you need probably a professional to work with you on that. That's important, because it is so ingrained You can't just throw a Buddhist technique on. You can calm your mind down so it becomes less, but you may need to actually work with a professional on that level.
So one more on that. Let's say it's something to do with fear of death. It's going to happen.
Yes.
That's how you started the talk.
Yes.
So how would you?
So if you have a fear of death, that's something that you do actually need to confront. And you have to then analyze it. And there are many Buddhist texts about dealing with death. There's actually Buddhist texts, and there's some great books on it of all the different Buddhist styles. How do you deal with death? Really important to read it. Get a perspective. It's going to happen, but you need to get in touch with that to a degree. You can't just go, I can't deal with it, I can't deal with it. Actually get in touch with it. And so there are many texts that you can read, modern ones, written by great Buddhist teachers. Pema Chodron is one, many different teachers. Actually read something about it. If you've got something fearful about it, then sit down and find a text that you can read or a book and go, okay, I'm gonna look at this. This is something that's coming up. So that's what I would suggest.
So that's basically learning more about.
Yeah, look at it, check it out, because it's going to happen. The more comfortable you are with it, the less it's going to cause a problem. I'll give you an instance of a friend of mine. This is many years ago. He was diagnosed with leukemia, and he told that he only had a year or two to live. It was very clear the leukemia was going to take him out. He did chemotherapy. He thought, well, I'm going to do the best I can. And he put himself in intense practice. He really did powerful practice. He lasted 7 years. All the people that he went into with chemo at the same hospital, they passed away. And he said, I think it was my practice that really, really brought it forward. And then he was in the hospital. I didn't get to see him, but we were doing a retreat actually in Melbourne. And one of my friends got to see him. And when he went to see him, he said, oh, hello, how are you doing? He said, look, I'd love to chat, but he said, in about 24 hours, I'm going to go into a coma. I've talked to the nurses and doctors. I'm going to go into a coma, and I've got a lot of work to do. So I'll see you next time. And my teacher gave him advice. He said, went to see him, he said, listen, your body's had it. It's rotten. He said, imagine your next rebirth, going to your next rebirth as a young child going to the ocean for the first time. Get excited about your new life, because this one has to go. Your body's not working for you. Get real about it. And so he did practice, and while we're on retreat, our teacher said, oh, our friend has now passed away. He said, no problem. His mind was completely okay. He died peacefully, and I'm sure he has high rebirth. So don't worry about it. He's fine. So that was his.
I like the way you turned it around. Basically, if we are indeed going to have another life, I think we have to be excited about it in some sense.
Yeah.
If that's all we can do at
that point. If you're going to go, look towards the new one. It's going to be positive rather than I'm terrified. In all different religions, all talk about a peaceful death. So that's what you need to create. And if you're agitated your whole life and think right at the end, I'm going to be peaceful, you miss the boat. Become peaceful now so that when you're ready to go, be peaceful. In fact, a friend of mine was working in a Buddhist, a Catholic hospice. She was a Buddhist, and there was a mother superior who had bone cancer. And she said she'd go in and help this mother superior. She only had a few weeks to live. And when she saw her, she was doing the rosary. And she said to her mother, what are you doing? She said, I'm praying for all the sick people. So instead of getting caught up in, oh, I'm dying, she said, I'm praying for all the people that are suffering. And she said, when she passed away, the feeling in that room was like a shrine. Her mind was beautiful. And she actually said to my friend, she said, oh, dear, do you have a practice? And my friend said, well, mother, I'm actually a Buddhist. She said, "Oh, wonderful. As long as you have a spiritual practice, that makes me really happy." So there was a mind of a beautiful mind, no matter what faith she was in, a truly spiritual person. And that's the way she died, thinking of others. And that's really the most you can do. If you can do that as you're approaching death, then you will really have a positive rebirth for sure.
Fantastic, Rod, and I share your enthusiasm here about the next life. Although all these Buddhists want to just end samsara, but a few comments I would like to read out for your own pleasure here. What an excellent talk! Thank you so much. So much to take away from tonight. And another person says, "Thank you for an excellent talk, Rod. Lots to take on board." So that's pretty much the sentiment out there.
Thank you very much.
You've given a very structured and well thought out talk, I would say.
Thank you.
So do you have anything to share?
No, I think I've pretty much done it. Thank you all for being present. I really appreciate you online and also you here. Appreciate you. Be kind to yourselves and everybody else. Thank you.